Hello everybody, Graysteel Plays, and today I wanted to share with you guys another quick tutorial. I would consider this to be a beginner's base tutorial, just meaning that there is not a ton of highly advanced techniques going on here, but there was some things that I wanted to share with you guys when building a base that may help you in your base designs. If you're anything like me, I do best when I have something of a blueprint before I make a base. If I don't have an idea in mind, I just kind of go all willy-nilly and everything looks all lopsided and nothing's equidistant or anything. And in Rimworld, you can do a lot with efficiency if you keep your base within certain parameters and if you follow certain guidelines. I'm going to go over a couple of the suggestions that I have when building a base, and as always, if you guys have suggestions on how to make this base or any base better, please leave them in the comment section below. I want to continue onward and eventually go with an intermediate base and then a late game or an advanced base tutorial later on, and I would like to include some of your ideas in that. So, without any further ado, let's start off. We're going to start off real quick with the overall size and structure of this base. Okay, so whenever you want to see the size of something, there's something of a tape measure in Rimworld that you can use in the order section. It's called the plan button. What this does is it allows you to essentially build an outline of whatever you want, and it will show you the distance of whatever it is you want to build. And then of course you can highlight everything using the remove plans, and that'll get rid of it. So right here, just checking to see what the distance between all the walls of this base is. If we start here from the outer wall, you're going to notice for some reason it stops at 51. It doesn't highlight any further than that. You can see it's 55 here. And then if we go down this way, it is 24 here. So that's the length and the width, I'll call this the length and width, I guess, of this giant rectangle, and that is the overall size of the base. Now, inside of this base, there's a couple of things. The very first thing you're going to notice is all these bedrooms up here. That's to house all of the colonists that are currently in this colony. There are 6 of them. Something to know about bedrooms. Bedrooms will cause, if they're small enough, the cramped environment negative buff to any person inside of it, but it's not something that you should really worry about too much to the point where you're making these massive rooms. It's actually more efficient to just make them small, and to some people, these are actually very big rooms. Some people just make them big enough for a bed. You'll get the -5 cramped space normally if you have them this small, but it only lasts while they're inside of the room. Once they get out, and they hang in any area for any kind of length of time, they'll eventually get rid of the cramped space or cramped environment. You can see that right there. Dell had come out of her room recently, and now the cramped environment just went away. The other reason to keep the buildings small, or I should say the rooms small, especially when you're doing a beginner base, is because you don't need as many coolers or heaters when you have less area or less space to heat or cool. So if you want to keep your power expenditure down, it's best to keep these rooms as small as possible. Now, something that I do like to make fairly large is my freezer. Now, you'll notice right here, this freezer is fairly large. It's 4 tiles wide. Well, actually, we can go straight over to the planning or even the remove plans. We can use this for a tape measure if we wanted to. But you can see from wall to wall, it's 6 wide. And then from wall to wall, it's 16 long. And then inside is enough space for 2 or even 3 if I needed them. Coolers. And this is enough to keep this at -1 degree, which is going to allow you to freeze all of your simple meals or any other items that you keep inside. You always want a freezer, because without a freezer, all these different items that are sitting outside when it comes to food will degrade. And honestly, food is one of the most important things in Rimworld, and you want to make sure that it lasts as long as possible, especially when you turn food into simple meals, which have a base degradation time of about 4 to 5 days. From there, we have a small dining room. I would consider this a small dining room in the setup, but it's big enough for the most part to house at least 8 colonists. As you can see here, if we ever had to, there's enough space to put a secondary table as well with more chairs. People can walk past the chairs so that it's not being blocked or anything like that. And it's big enough to the point where everyone seems to be fairly happy enough to eat inside here, and it even has some room if you want to put down some additional sculptures. Sculptures are good for getting the overall beauty of a room up. If you ever wanted to see the beauty of your room, go down here to the bottom right, click on the beauty display, and you'll get the opportunity, we can zoom in as far as we can to see, to see the beauty of each and every object within this room. You can see here, for instance, these chairs have a beauty of 13, while each individual tile section has a beauty of 2. While we're on the topic of tiles, I would, if you have the ability to, tile the entirety of the interior of your base. The reason why is because A, the tile is not flammable, like grass or trees or whatever have you. It will give you a +2 beauty instead of wood tiling, or wood flooring, I should say, which is very quick to lay down, but gives you a 0 beauty modifier. And for the most part, on most maps, there's usually at least plenty of opportunities to get lots of blocks so that you can get, I should say, lots of chunks so that you can make lots of blocks so that you can be able to make tiles such as this. Another thing to note about tile, if you are a min-maxer, if we go over to grass, right here we see soil, you can see all the way at the bottom down here, it says walk speed 87%. Notice that when you're on tile, your walk speed is 100%. So your colonists will move faster on any area that is tiled. From there, in the middle of the colony, you'll notice I have what I would consider to be a weapon stockpile zone. It has enough area for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the weapons cabinets here. And these cabinets are very good, the equipment racks, I should say. These equipment racks are very important because anytime a piece of weapon or armor is stored inside of them, it faces no deterioration at all. I keep this in the middle of the colony just so that it's easy for people to get to no matter which part of the colony they're at in case they need to swap over some weapons or armor. From there, you'll notice one of the grandest rooms is the crafting room. And the reason for this is because this is where most of my colonists spend a lot of their time. And if you play Rimworld, Rimworld is a very crafting heavy game, so a lot of your colonists will be spending a lot of time here as well. The way I have this laid out is that all of these benches have the colonists with their back facing the wall. And the reason for this is so that if you ever needed to go back over and add additional benches, you could put them here, this way, I should say, so that the colonists, if you see, are facing opposite of one another, and you can keep them flush to one another, so you can add that many more crafting spots. Now, this is probably more crafting spots than you'll need for quite some time, especially in a beginner base. Also in the middle are these tool cabinets, which extend to most of the tool areas around, so that they can gain the +6% work speed factor. Also, if you didn't know, you can have a 2 tool cabinet stacking bonus for 12% work speed on any crafting station that's allowable to be utilized by the tool cabinet. From there, the last area on the bottom, all the way to the back of the colony, is the main storage area for things that don't fit in the freezer and things that don't fit in a place like the weapons area. This is for a lot of your kind of like components and medicines and wood. And I do have my herbal medicine in here because it spoils in a couple of years. But realistically, what I would probably do is if you have the space, and I do have plenty of space here. This does fill up quickly, but in an instance like this, I've made it large enough. Make sure to put your herbal medicine in the freezer so that it doesn't go bad, because while it does last a long time, you can see that it will eventually spoil in about 2 years here. Also at the back of the colony is another small subsection here that's completely walled in with the batteries. You don't really need to wall in your batteries. I just have it as an extra layer of protection if for some reason something breaks into here so that the batteries aren't taken out or down. But a lot of this reason is just because I had built this first and then built everything around it. If you wanted to, you really don't need this exterior wall here. I just kind of kept it as is because I still have plenty of space for my stockpile zone. And then moving upward, we have a very small hospital area with 3 hospital beds. Your vitals monitor has the ability to connect to 3 hospital beds, so there's no reason not to have 3 if you have the materials for it. And as you can see, it gives a treatment factor of 4% and an immunity gain speed factor of +2%, which is very important, especially when you're getting a lot of infections. At the back of the colony, outside, that is, if I go over here to architect, and then I go over here to zone, and then we go over to the roof area, you'll notice I have a large unroofed area, and this is all of our fields. Our fields are still within the boundaries of our walls, and that's very important, because if you don't keep your fields inside, the raiders will set fire to them, and it's just going to cause a lot of issues. So when at all possible, make sure to keep them inside, and of course, keep it unroofed. Now back here, and you can use whatever style of energy system you like. Some people certainly like, if we go over here to power, some people certainly like solar generators. But the reason that I like these wind turbines is because I happen to make my interior wall area just the correct size for the wind turbines, and they work well when you're planting because trees get in the way of the wind turbines as they spin. But if you turn this into a planted area, your colonists will take all of the trees and grasses and shrubs down and keep them planted at all times, hence allowing these wind turbines to spin at full speed and not be obstructed, which is a pretty cool synergy that wind turbines have in conjunction with all of your plotted areas. Plus, they don't really take up a ton of space, or I should say they don't kill a ton of plantable space, which is kind of nice. You'll notice that there's only a 2 square area here that they're killing that moves down the middle of the plot. Now, way back here, and this is only for a more maybe advanced build, but I just wanted to show this in case you ever had the ability to do it, is 4 mortars with a plus symbol of walls in the middle. And if you've never seen a mortar before, if you go over here to security, and let's turn this on so that we can see everything that there is to build. If we go over here to the mortars, you'll notice that the requirements for the mortars isn't that hefty. Obviously, there's a research requirement for them, and they're 250 steel and 4 components. Now, while that's decent, these things build very, very fast. So it's not like something that will take forever to build. They're up very quickly if you need to respond to, say, another mortar siege that's incoming. But the reason that we went ahead and made this plus symbol here, I'm going to show you that right now. So I went ahead and damaged this mortar. Now let's see what happens when this mortar explodes. Here we go. It's going to explode in just a second. And there we go. Now notice that the mortars right next to it were not damaged. Now watch what would happen if you didn't have this wall here. All right, I went ahead and damaged the mortar again. And look at that. A giant chain explosion because there was no walls in the middle there protecting them. With those walls, you can keep your mortars very, very close to each other, and you don't have to worry about chain explosions that you would normally have because remember, mortars explode in a 3-block radius all around them and will damage things unless there's something in the way to take the brunt of the explosion. Now I'm going to show you a couple other things here about the base that I do that's just kind of personal preference. I'm going to go back over here to the zone area and click on the roof area. Now you're going to notice that right here, this part of the hallway is not roofed. The reason why I do this is because a lot of my researchers or crafters spend a lot of time inside of their particular crafting station. And they can sometimes get the cabin fever debuff, especially if I'm not watching them. This way, since the crafting stations, the eating area, the supply station, and the storage station, as well as the freezer, are all across from their bedrooms, they will eventually walk through this hallway that's unroofed to their bedroom to sleep, and that will get rid of the debuff that they would normally get for staying inside all the time, that cabin fever debuff. So it's just an easy way to keep cabin fever off of them. I also use vents here to keep the area. If you click on the vent, you can see what area it's forcing to share air with. I keep this so that all of the areas are, for the most part, very similar in temperature. If we go outside here, we'll see that the temperature is 29 degrees Celsius, pretty warm. But inside here, you can see 22, 21, 21, 23 here toward the back. And then all the way over here, because this room is sharing with this area, look at this large area back here. This is the hottest at 24. And then down here, now, of course, this area gets the least amount of use because this is only for when people are injured, so it's a little bit warmer than the rest of the areas. Our storage area as well always stays a little bit warmer because this is only used for storage. You can see that at 28 degrees Celsius. Right here, our crafting area, we need to make sure that everyone in there is very comfortable, 21 degrees Celsius. 21 degrees Celsius inside of our weapons area. 21 degrees Celsius inside of our eating area, and then of course -1 degree Celsius inside of our freezer to keep that below freezing, to keep everything frozen at all times. Something else to note is every area where people are going to be in most of the time does have a light. This is so that they don't get the in darkness debuff. You don't have to worry about the bedrooms, because if they're in the bedroom just to go to sleep, their mood will freeze when they go to sleep, and they won't usually get an in darkness debuff unless, say, they're meditating in there or something. Now that we're done here, let's take a real quick minute to look at some of the defensive structures, just to show you how this base defends against raiders or tribalists, and we'll actually do a couple of runs. Now, this isn't really a defense tutorial, so to speak, but I do want to show you that in the beginning, it is good to set up at least some preliminary defenses once you have the opportunity to do so. And you don't need things like turrets and landmines and things of that nature to have a really, really well set up defendable base. So the two different defensive structures that we're going to be using here is a elongated pathway with several, and a lot of them are blocked with chunks, but you can see one here, deadfall traps. And you'll notice that the deadfall traps are put in a checkered pattern. This is so that your people can weave through them and move these blocks and rearm these traps with the least possible potential chance of setting off the traps, while the raiders and pirates and there have you that come in have the best possible chance of setting off as much traps as possible. Now, your colonists will always have a 0.4% chance of setting off the traps, and this is down from, I think it was a 2.5% chance of setting off the traps before. On top of that, all of the area has chunks in it. This is to slow the raiders down, and also so that raiders can't stand or stop on the area of the stones. A lot of times, if you have areas, like let's say right here, and you were firing at a raider, if this chunk wasn't here, he would be able to stand here and utilize this wall as hard cover and shoot back at you. But having stone in the area, or really any item like a chunk, enables the area to be essentially blocked off to where raiders can't stand or stop in that area. They can move through it, they just can't stop there. Now, to make sure that your people aren't moving through this big elongated pathway, there's two doors here so that they can go up to this area and up to this area, and your colonists will always choose the path of least resistance, so they will always use these doorways instead of going along these traps needlessly and continuously rolling the dice on whether or not they're going to hit that 0.4%. Now, what you can do is extend this hallway as long as you want. You can make it as windy as you want, and you can continue going and put more traps down, and those traps will, of course, kill more and more raiders and allow your area to be more defensible. Now, there is a secondary defense here, and that is these little buttress walls here that are made, as well as the doorways. You can put two people in the doorways and one person behind the buttress wall here. And as well as, if you have a melee person, I would fit them out behind the doorways here when people come in so that they can get them locked up so that your fighters with ranged weapons can shoot from afar. Let's do a real quick run with some tribalists and some pirates to show you exactly how that works. Alright, I've started on a raid. We've got some raiders coming here. Let's go ahead and start getting our people that can fight into position. We do have quite a few warriors here that have the ability to shoot weapons. That's Banks, Dell, and Mick. So we'll go ahead and draft all them. And when we do have one melee fighter, and that's Nathan, we'll draft him as well. Now you'll notice that none of these people have very good weapons. We have some survival rifles and I think just a shiv. Oh, it's a plasteel knife. I'm sorry. So I'm not utilizing any impressive weaponry here. You're going to notice that a lot of the work gets done by these traps. And the best thing about traps are they can be made by any of your resources. If you go to the deadfall traps, they can be made with just about anything. Plasteel are the strongest. Steel is also very good. But I usually use blocks, which don't do as much damage but are so easy to get that I can make a ton of deadfall traps and not really worry about running down all of my materials and resources. Now, as our opponents close in, let's get everyone into position. I want one ranged attacker here, one ranged attacker here, one ranged attacker here, and then our melee person right here. These two individuals we'll just kind of draft and keep back out of the way for right now. And I'm going to go ahead and fast forward to show you guys exactly how things are going to work here. Now, you're going to notice everyone coming down. Sometimes raiders will start hitting walls and things, but typically I would say at least 50% go for your stuff. Now I should have put you should always put your little dog in a secure animal area down here. I didn't think about that. So our poor Cheshire Terrier is, or I'm sorry, Yorkshire Terrier is sitting there sad and alone right now. And right here is what I was talking about. The opponents tried to go through our little area here that we had made full of traps, and it completely destroyed them. They all died before they could even get into our colonists. Now, you may be asking yourself, why are there some farm areas out here on fire right now? I wanted to make some real quick crops on the outside to show you guys that if there are crops on the outside, those pesky raiders will try and set fire to them. So keep them inside and walled as much as possible so that they're not being set on fire like this. Alright, I've gone ahead and started up another raid here. Now we're going to be dealing with tribalists to see how our base handles against them. Tribalists are a little bit of a different animal. A lot of times you get a lot more of them. They're just less well armored and armed. So it can be difficult to take out enough of them unless you have very quick firing weapons. But remember, all we're using is survival rifles. So we're going to go ahead and do our best. Let's go ahead and draft everyone over here and we'll start moving everyone around. Again, we want Banks over here, Dell over here, Mick behind cover, and then Nathan to lock people down. Now, one of the things that we didn't do before, and we want to make sure to do this time, is to get our poor little Yorkshire Terrier inside so he's not getting stabbed in the junk with various shivs and beaten with clubs. So let's go over to Architect, let's go to Zone, let's go on to Expand Allowed Area. You can see there's already an area called Animal 1. Let's go ahead and click on that. And then we'll make Animal 1, I don't know, over here by the hospital area. So now that this is made, we can go over to our animals, and we can click on Animal Area 1 for our Terrier, and our Terrier will head around over to this area to hide. Now let's go ahead and fast forward things along and see what happens to these various raiders as they come in. Now you're going to notice that quite a few of them are going to probably break off and do various things. Some of them might hit the walls. Here we go over here. Some of them may try and get in through the door, but a majority of them are going to go down this area. And right here you can see one has already fallen to the traps. And a lot of them will kind of like Jimmy Jive all around on the traps. It's kind of funny how they get caught and kind of all freaked out. You see right there? See how this bow user just stepped on a trap and was like, nope, I'm not having any of it. Let me out of this BS. That's pretty funny. There's another one down, another one down, another one down. These traps are working great. Our weapon users are all sitting here ready to go. You notice they are staggered so that they don't shoot each other in the back. Let's see if anyone makes it down. Boom! A nice shot right there. He's down. Oh, and if these guys do break through over here, I'm going to show you something real interesting that you're going to want to see when it comes to fleeing foes with this particular build. Let's see what our fighters do here. There we go, another couple of shots. Nathan is locking everyone down. And there we go. Everyone has been destroyed and everyone's starting to run away. Something to note is this right here. This is so strange. If you have people inside with these doors the way they are, people will try and bust through these doors to get out rather than run past the traps. And as well, if people were beating on these doors previously before you won the raid, they will keep beating on the doors, which is very funny because that essentially allows you to get additional kills and they won't be leaving the area. Let's go ahead and show you that real quick. Let's go ahead and grab some people. Well, let's just grab one. Let's just grab Dell over here. Bring her right around here. Bring her here. Open up the door. Get her back over here. I'm sorry, let's go back over here. Open up this door. Now we'll go ahead and hold open right there. Now we'll go ahead and grab Dell and walk away. We don't want her to be caught. And you can see this guy is just sitting here caught on the door. I don't know why this is. I assume it must be some sort of bug or something. There we go. Now he's finally past the door and everyone can shoot him to death. I'll never understand why doors work in that fashion. It must have something to do with the pathing of the people. Anyway, I just wanted to get the opportunity to show you guys the overall base structure here of a more beginner style of base. And remember, a couple of things to note: have an area for your crafting that's fairly large because your people are going to be spending a lot of time there. And if they spend a lot of time there, eventually they will get the very spacious buff if it's large enough. Make sure that you have enough bedrooms for everyone. Make sure that you have additional space that you could break down to add, should you need to immediately, another prisoner bedroom, which we could do very easily by putting a wall here with a door and then another bed for a nice prisoner bedroom. Make sure that you have an area for interior non-refrigerated storage, an area for refrigerated storage. Make sure that your refrigerated storage area is right next to your eating area so that people can just walk in, grab a meal, and sit right down at the dining table. The reason I say that is because a lot of times, if this area is too far away, these people are so lazy that they'll just eat inside of the freezer and they'll get the eat without a table negative debuff. Make sure that you have an area for weapons, and if you can make them, feel free to make sure that you create some of these equipment racks. You can make them out of blocks, so they're very easy to get different resources for. Make sure that you have heaters and coolers to keep your area at a neutral temperature so that no one has the sleep in the hot and cold function. And then whatever way that you choose to power your area, make sure that it is fully encompassed by walls, and keep your your fields that you're going to be growing your crops in fully encompassed by walls as well. But make sure that you don't keep it with a ceiling area over it. Always make sure that you can go to architect, click on clear build roof area, and make sure that there's no roof area over your growing. And then if you get to the point where you want to make some mortars and you want to keep them nice and compact so they're not really far away from one another, make sure that you have at least a pile of artillery for each mortar. I like to keep them inside of the equipment racks because if you didn't know, when artillery sits on the ground, it eventually deteriorates and it will explode if it continues to deteriorate. The equipment rack, however, allows it so that it never deteriorates. And put these walls here so that it protects all of your mortars from one another. Guys, I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. I tried to keep it informational while not going too overboard with the length. I know that there was a lot more I could have discussed, and there was probably a lot less I could have discussed as well. I want to keep making these tutorials better, more concise, and more informationally packed for you guys. Remember, if there's anything that you would suggest or things that people should know when they are building their colony for the best possible base they can get, feel free to let them know in the comment section below, and maybe that'll help me build the next intermediate base for the mid-game purposes. Until the next time, folks, stay foxy and much love.